Hi, thanks for tuning in today. This is Brandy Lloyd with The Path for Health, and I'm going to talk to you about some thyroid basics today. This is a big area of questions for my clients when they first meet with me. So I'm going to talk about the top 5 questions that they usually have. What is your thyroid gland? What does it feel like when it isn't working right? What are the best tests to determine if you have thyroid issues? What are the causes or triggers for thyroid problems? And what can you do if you suspect or if you already know that you have thyroid problems? So if you are interested in having these 5 questions answered, then keep on listening. Hi, thank you for joining me on the Path for Health podcast. My name is Brandy Lloyd, and I will be your host. I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and personal trainer. I've had a long career as a personal trainer, but about 10 years ago, my health status began to unravel. I eventually was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called spondyloarthropathy. This is an inflammatory arthritis that affects nearly every joint in my body, including my spine. After a long road of discovering food allergies, incorporating stress management techniques, focusing on time on gut healing and hormone balance, I have finally found the restoration for my health. At this time, I am prescription-free and hope to remain that way, but I'm open and grateful for whatever lies ahead. Most of my time is now spent helping people just like me, people who are trying to find answers to improve their health through diet and lifestyle changes. This podcast is for educational purposes. Please consult your doctor before making any changes based on what you learn here. My goal is to educate and inspire you. So please don't forget to leave a comment and share this podcast with your own circle of people. And I hope you reach out to me too. I have many different types of educational platforms and support. Now let's get on with the show. Okay, so let's just jump right into this whole thyroid pool, and we're going to talk about subclinical or clinical thyroid dysfunction. Subclinical just means that you're not necessarily being treated maybe or diagnosed with a thyroid condition like an autoimmune disease such as Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but your thyroid may not be working up to par. That's subclinical thyroid dysfunction. Most of my clients have subclinical needs, and it's something that we easily work through and can put away a lot of their most pain in the butt kind of symptoms, whether it's the weight gain or the anxiety, and we'll talk about that list later. And then the rest of my clients, it's really amazing how many Hashimoto's thyroiditis clients I actually have worked with. And one of their biggest complaints and areas of frustration is they really thought that when they finally got their diagnosis and they finally were put on medication, whether it's something synthetic or natural medication, they just thought that all of their symptoms and kind of woe is me problems they've been dealing with, and there are a lot of them, that those would just go away. And they're frustrated because they didn't. And that's what we're really going to talk about today, is a little bit of that frustration and where it comes from and what you can actually do about it. Now, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune disease in which the body's actually developed antibodies against the thyroid gland and starts attacking it to the point of destruction that inhibits the thyroid from doing its job. And this leads to low thyroid production down the line, and that's why we call it a hypothyroid situation. There is other thyroid diseases such as Graves' disease, and it's just the opposite. The thyroid is just producing way too much hormone, and we call it hyperthyroid. So let's get right into some of those questions that I promised you that I would answer. The first one is, what is your thyroid gland? It makes me think about that movie back in the day about those kids in the 50s. I think it's not The Sandlot. I don't know what that movie was called. And one of the kids was talking about having a cousin whose was really, really heavy. I'm assuming like a fat girl. And he said something was wrong with her. And he says like her hypoid gland or something. That's what we're talking about, is the thyroid gland. And it is a butterfly-shaped gland located on the front of your neck in that top portion. And if you kind of know what you're feeling for, you can actually feel it in there. And part of this thyroid gland is really important, and it's part of your endocrine system. And the endocrine system manages all the hormones in your body. And all the endocrine glands, I'll list them out here: your pituitary, your parathyroid, your adrenals, your ovaries, your pancreas, your pineal, and your adipose tissue, which we call fat tissue. All of those glands have specific jobs to do, and they all communicate all over your body, not only with each other, but with the cells via hormones. So your endocrine system works together using what we call a negative feedback or a closed loop to govern, regulate, and manage all of these different hormones all over your body. Remember, hormones are just little chemical messengers. So a good example of a negative feedback loop would be like your thermostat heater in your house. You set it at a certain temperature to keep your house temperature between a certain preset range. And as long as your home stays in that range, life is good, right? So depending on who you are and what time of the year it is, that you know your sweet spot. Some people say, oh, I like my house about 68 or 73 or whatever it is. And you certainly don't want to be sweating your butt off in your house or having to run around with all these coats on. And your body uses a similar system as a thermostat. Your endocrine system really relies on that thermostat to be set properly so that all these hormones can give the proper signals all around your body. And just a reminder, these hormones are just little chemical messengers. They don't actually do the work. They are going to have some other gland do the work. And they're essential to our lives. And one of the things that I like to say about hormones is they just really add color and vibrancy to your life. You know, all those feel-good kind of things are because of our hormones. And when they're out of whack, life tends to be out of whack and not colored so pretty, trust me. Now, your endocrine system really has three main jobs. The first one is hormone regulation, like we've been talking about. The second one is controlling growth and body development. And the third thing is governing the operation of the reproductive system. And one of my most recent podcasts, 2 or 3 podcasts ago, I talked about that governing operating system as far as the OAT axis, your ovaries, adrenal, and your thyroid. Today we're going to really hone in on the thyroid as a standalone kind of organ, but each organ in the endocrine system does have specific duties. So what are some of the duties that your thyroid has? Well, your thyroid is super duper important and has a lot of jobs as it regulates the body, and it also influences a lot of other actions in the body by its thyroid hormones that it produces. So it actually makes and secretes its own hormones, which is pretty cool. So let's go over that list a little bit. First, your thyroid is in charge of metabolism and energy balance, hence the weight gain and fatigue, right? Your biological clock, or what we call your circadian rhythm, which is why a lot of thyroid sufferers have problems with sleep. Smooth muscle contractions like in your heart and also throughout your digestive system. We'll talk a lot more about your digestive system in a little bit. Glandular secretions, like I just mentioned with your thyroid, and some immune activity. And another little, like I was actually surprised to learn this when I was in school, but your thyroid actually helps regulate chemical composition of your cellular fluid. That's amazing. How many cells do we have? Trillions and bazillions. I don't even know that number. And your thyroid has a place in that. As well as the activity of your nervous system. It also stimulates the synthesis of protein into specific amino acids. It even increases the use of glucose to make ATP, which is what your cells, specifically your mitochondria, use for fuel. I talked about that in my last podcast. on mitochondria. It also increases lipolysis or fat breakdown. So you can see when your thyroid isn't working well, why you have all of these issues. And the last one is a big one, especially for women my age, 48 and over. This is, it increases cholesterol excretion. So it's not uncommon the older we get as women to start seeing our cholesterol numbers change, and we're saying, gosh, I don't understand what's wrong. I'm eating this way and living this way, and I don't understand it. And what's really awesome is once you get that thyroid in line, we see those cholesterol numbers line out to where they're supposed to be. Now, the thyroid is really one of the four major players of the endocrine system. That is a big team. I'm talking your thyroid, your sex hormones, your adrenals, and your pituitary. And one of the key symptoms that make women actually stop and consider whether or not they even have thyroid issues is because they find it almost impossible to lose weight. And they talk to their other friends because it's a lot of women in their 30s and 40s are discovering that they have thyroid issues. And it's a relief, but it's also a time of frustration because, like I mentioned earlier, that pill doesn't necessarily cure every ill we have. And I'm going to give you some tools today so that whether or not you have your diagnosis and you're on something like Nature-Throid or Synthroid, that those little nagging issues, like maybe some weight that you're hanging on to, we can work that out because your thyroid gland sets your metabolism. And I got to say, that's one of the first things that women talk to me about when they come to me is when they just can't lose weight no matter what they're doing. They go, I just wonder if it's my thyroid. Now, usually, if they did go to the doctor and mention maybe, thyroid issues, sadly for a lot of women, kind of what we get is the song and dance, well, you're 48 or you're 53 and this is just kind of part of the deal with perimenopause or menopause. But you might be lucky enough and they might do a blood draw or some lab work on you. But most of the doctors, especially your general practitioners, are just going to run your thyroid stimulating hormone, or what is more commonly known as TSH. Now, that really doesn't tell you how well the thyroid is working. Your pituitary gland is what communicates with the thyroid, and it uses TSH to do that. It's just a simple little hormonal signal to tell the thyroid, hey, you need to, get into action here because of this negative feedback loop. The body, the hypothalamus and the pituitary sensed that there wasn't enough T3 or T4 circulating in the bloodstream. So it sends out that little push, that TSH, to wake up the thyroid and say, hey, you need to do your job. Well, that's not the whole story, right, girls? When you suspect that you have poor thyroid function and your doctor is only testing TSH, you're only getting part of the story. And I'm going to cover more about testing in just a few minutes. But let's go on to the next question. And now that we know what the thyroid does and where it is, what does it feel like when it malfunctions? Here's the tricky thing about thyroid dysfunction. It affects people both emotionally and physically. So your lab work isn't the whole story. And many women who have hypo or underactive thyroid actually complain of feeling kind of like numb to the world or rather unmotivated, just kind of detached. And those really are some symptoms that your thyroid is not working well. But I'm going to slide over into some of the common physical symptoms of low thyroid or hypothyroid, whether it's clinical, you're being treated, or subclinical hypothyroidism. We're talking about constipation, weight loss resistance. That just simply means that you have a hard time losing weight, muscle aches and stiffness, hair loss, joint pain, cold intolerance, depression, fatigue, irregular menstrual cycles, really dry skin, and forgetfulness or brain fog. Do any of those ring a bell or sound familiar? As far as I know, I do have some current lab work out, and in mid-April, I'm meeting with my own functional medical doctor for a little bit of a checkup. These are a lot of the same conditions that my own autoimmune disease of spondyloarthropy shares with low hypothyroid. Last I checked, my thyroid levels looked good in the fully expressed lab values, which we'll go over in a little bit. But this is another reason why it's very difficult to determine whether or not somebody really does need to focus on the thyroid. All of these overlapping things, and even overlapping with perimenopause and menopause symptoms. So the frustration is valid, and I hear you, and I look into the eyes of my soon-to-be clients all the time, and I just can see the frustration and often the tears, because you feel like, am I going crazy? And why is this normal? Because it's horrible. The flip side of hypothyroidism, which would be low function of the thyroid, would be overactive or hyperthyroid. Whether it's subclinical or clinical, it kind of looks like this. Weight loss. They just have the hardest time putting on weight. Anxiety, fatigue, hair loss, tremors. I found that interesting. Menstrual disturbances. To be honest with you, I don't even know what those are. I have seen them. I have seen them described that way several times, disturbances. I don't even know what that is. Heat intolerance, racing heartbeats or palpitations, protruding eyes, hunger, and irritability. And here's the real kicker. You have to keep in mind that it's not uncommon for a person, especially with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, to fluctuate and sometimes go into that hyperthyroid side of things. And another thing to remember is this, that these are the most common issues, but you don't necessarily have to check every single box to say, whoa, my thyroid is not working right. So we do have other ways to diagnose. Now, I am not in a position as a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, such a mouthful. I don't make diagnoses. I make protocols, right? But I'm going to talk to you about how a functional medical doctor would diagnose you with a thyroid issue. Remember, we don't want to diagnose ourselves like the whole WebMD or reading a book and just checking the boxes. I think it's a good place to start, like exactly how my podcasts are designed. And I use a lot of quizzes and different things with my clients, but it doesn't always paint the whole picture. And it's still, you do have the need to get into the doctor and check some of the live in person kind of aspects of an appointment before you diagnose yourself and before you go out and throw yourself on some sort of thyroid supplement or treatment, because there's a lot of them out there that are over the counter. But let's go on a little bit and talk about some of the tests. Now, the tests can be really confusing. As a matter of fact, I believe the last thing I read is when it comes to diagnosing a woman with an actual thyroid disease, an autoimmune disease, it takes an average of about 10 years before these women are diagnosed with something like Hashimoto's. As I stated earlier, the endocrine system is extremely complex, and it actually must be looked at as a whole. And I think about it as like a wide angle lens, or stepping back and getting a bigger view, because the thyroid is involved in many different processes in the body, and you want to make sure that you're not honing down on something downstream. We need to make sure that we look upstream and we see the whole layout. So many different autoimmune diseases share symptoms like fatigue and anxiety and depression and muscle aches and so on. And then you have to throw in the mental health side of things. And it just gets difficult to diagnose, especially if you're too focused. So pan out a little bit with that wide angle lens and really try and take into fact all of both the physical and emotional sides of this. And sadly, when it comes to that, because us women, we are more emotional, we tend to not be taken as seriously, and they just want to put us, say, on maybe an anxiety medication or just a sex hormone prescription, whether it's hormone replacement therapy or birth control or whatever. And some of these things are definitely necessary, but they often come prematurely. It's just band-aiding without really getting to the root of the problem. So we pull back and we look at the whole picture, and then we start digging for roots. And that's what some of this testing is kind of a way to dig for the roots, because let's be honest, it's not uncommon to feel like, everything is in our heads, right, gals? And you start to feel like when your doctor's saying, what you need to do to lose this weight is you need to, eat less, you need to exercise more, or those famous words, just eat healthy, or calories in, calories out, or whatever. And like it's some matter of just willpower. Now, there is a little bit of truth to that statement. there is some factors that are in your head that you need to learn to deal with, and mindset and knowing your why and motivation. And you might need some accountability of like working with a nutritionist like myself. And you also need to learn how to set yourself up for wellness and success by making sure that while your body is learning the proper signals again and recalibrating, that you aren't tempted by certain things that are just exacerbating the problem or continuing this vicious cycle that I'm going to be sharing with you about. But we should never dismiss things as far as just saying, hey, it's just in your head. And conventional medicine, if I can get off my soapbox there, it has some different lab ranges than functional medical doctors use, and there's a lot of controversy in this in regards to how those ranges were set years ago and who set them. And it comes down to this: when they basically took a slice of the population and started doing some testing on them to develop ranges for doctors to use, these people, a lot of the population weren't normal. As a matter of fact, a lot of the population that they used had had thyroid issues themselves, or that they were elderly, which, as we age, everything changes about us. And so to use an elderly person or to use somebody with thyroid issues and call that normal is just not appropriate. So the functional medical community has come up with updated ranges, and that's another reason why I myself work with a functional medical doctor, and he uses those ranges. I'm not going to give you hard numbers here because I really don't want you to diagnose yourself. I don't want you to you can find them online. I just don't want to be a party to somebody getting out their lab slips and going, oh my gosh, I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. But a difference would be, give an example between conventional medicine and functional medicine would be TSH, for example, the thyroid stimulating hormone. The functional medical ranges for normal would be between 1 and 2. And the conventional medical model might say between 4 and 5. That's a huge, huge difference when you're looking for, is TSH elevated, right? So it's one of the ways that a lot of women go undiagnosed for quite some time. Now, remember, TSH is not actually a thyroid hormone. It's that stimulating hormone sent from the pituitary to the thyroid. Remember, its job is just to wake up that thyroid so it can do things like produce its own thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, when they are getting low in the body. We have to keep that thermostat in mind. So let's talk about T3 and T4. And you hear people like myself talk about free T3 and free T4, as well as reverse T3. What the heck is all this free and reverse and everything all about? Free just means circulating. That's it. It just means circulating. So the thyroid has made it and it is circulating around in your body. Another important thing to remember is T4 actually converts to T3. You need to know this because reverse T3 is the remaining T4 that actually didn't convert. And it's an important number to know, especially if you do have an autoimmune disease and you're trying to determine the right amount of dosing. Speaking of dosing, everybody's different. One of the things that I have to do, and I am called to do as a nutritional therapy practitioner, is to work with and evaluate each and every one of my clients as an individual. We call it bio-individuality. And you aren't a lab value, my friend. How you feel is way more important than lab ranges in a lot of circumstances, and thyroid is one of those circumstances. Now, it does not work out with, say, high blood pressure. Well, I feel great. Those lab values are actually very important. But I have had many clients that feel like absolute crap only to have their doctors tell them, well, you know what, everything's in range, so just too bad, or maybe it's all in your head, or whatever it is. I've even had the opposite happen where clients have been feeling fantastic, and then they walk in my door and they look terrible, and I'm like, what's going on? And they said, well, my doctor's trying to get me to this range, and so this is what they're doing with my dosages. Now, I'm not their doctor, and I'm not going to argue with their doctor. So my job is to just educate them and give them some good questions to ask their doctor. And so that's why it's really important to know about free T3 and T4 and reverse T3, and to be able to talk to your doctor about what kind of values are you using to do my dosing, because there's really a lot of errors. But along with that, even the best of the best in the thyroid community will tell you there's a little bit of trial and error, not only with your dosing of your thyroid medication, but also with your diet and lifestyle along the way. And we'll talk about how those work together in just a little bit. Now, all of these hormones do need to be checked, and there's so many nuances and too many for me to cover in just this podcast. And I really want to express that I recommend you finding a good functional medical doctor for all of this testing. This next part of the test that I want to talk about is TPO-AB and TG-AB. These are two antibody tests, and they stand for thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin. I know. TPO-AB and TG-AB is good enough. But one or both of these antibodies can be elevated if an autoimmune disease is actually suspected. And the higher the number, the more aggressive the antibodies have become. The antibodies are just like little soldiers that your body has created, your immune system has created it in a way to defend itself. But it is not good when your body actually starts attacking its own tissue, which is pretty much the definition for autoimmune disease. That's auto or self. Your immune system is attacking yourself. Believe it or not, there actually is a condition called seronegative Hashimoto's thyroiditis, in which your antibody numbers come up negative. So again, there's some of those nuances. Now, what actually causes or triggers thyroid dysfunction? In one of my past and really recent podcasts, I talked about how in a woman's lifetime, we are more susceptible to triggering autoimmune diseases, and that is when we're teenagers, when we just get our period and we're going through that time of puberty and crazy hormone times. That's one time. And another time is when we're pregnant, and then postnatally right after we have that baby, and then again in perimenopause. And perimenopause, and then menopause itself. So age makes us susceptible because our hormones change so much during those times that it leaves our body open for stressors. And that's what we're going to talk about. There's some main causes here that I want to talk about, and there's three of them. One is genetic predisposition, meaning it's just in your genes. The second is triggers that turn on those genes. And the third would be intestinal permeability, or what is commonly referred to as leaky gut. And I talk extensively about that in my podcast. Now, remember genetic predisposition. I love how Chris Kresser says it, and I say it all the time. Your genes are just like bullets in your gun, but it is lifestyle that is going to pull that trigger or not. And that's what we've learned in the field of epigenetics. So just because you have a genetic predisposition doesn't necessarily mean that you're done for, that this is it for you. It's not a prophecy, it's a possibility, right? So let's move on to the triggers. I know what triggered I have a really, really strong feeling what triggered my own autoimmune disease, and that was stress. I just had an impaired stress management ability and detoxification issues, and I had some digestive issues. And these are all overlying factors also with how to get leaky gut in the first place. And leaky gut's that last one, remember? So we have genetic predisposition, and we have triggers that turn on these genes, and intestinal permeability or leaky gut. So when you're dealing with those three issues, that's what makes you kind of higher risk. Well, you can't do anything about your genes, but you can do something about the triggers. That we'll talk about that, so that we don't turn those genes on, and you can start to recognize when those triggers are in your life. And you can also do something about intestinal permeability or leaky gut. So most of you know what leaky gut is, so I'm not going to go into that right now. It's in past podcasts. But how do you know? How do you even get leaky gut? that was my question. It's like, what did this just happen? Well, I'll tell you what, there's 6 main contributors to leaky gut. The first one is the constant consumption of foods that you have sensitivities to. A lot of people don't necessarily know what they are sensitive to until you take it away. A good example of that would be one of my clients that hadn't yet given up dairy. And I've been working with her for quite a while to give up dairy. And she finally did. And she says, guess what happened? I mean, I'm talking like a year. And she finally did. And she gave up dairy. And she goes, guess what happened? I don't have weepy eyes anymore. I don't have any more congestion in my lungs. And I don't have that irritating cough. And here she thought that she was going to have to get some major testing done. She had already had quite a few respiratory tests and they weren't finding anything. She was afraid she had Wegener's and all these other autoimmune conditions, and she didn't. She just had a food sensitivity. So continuing to eat foods that you are sensitive to actually contributes to leaky gut. It just inflames your body, puts it in a constant state of stress. Another way that you can get leaky gut is nutrient depletions. So already, if you have leaky gut, it's this vicious cycle, then you're going to not get the proper nutrients, right? But nutrient depletions happen in the form of, well, let's say you're on birth control. There's specific vitamins and minerals that birth control just leaches right out of your body. And there's a lot of different medications that have that nutrient depletion issue. That is some of the most common side effects, and some that people don't really think about. They're thinking things are more like bloating or headaches or skin rashes. Oh, that medication does this to me. So then we'll move on to impaired stress management abilities. That was one of my issues, was I didn't even realize how stressed that I was because I was just really, really busy. I just thought I can juggle all of these things. I may have been juggling all those things, but my body actually wasn't responding to it very well. I had elevated levels of cortisol pretty much on the 24/7. And that goes with the next one, impaired detoxification abilities. If your liver is overtaxed and you are unable to get toxins, whether it is pet dander or air pollutants or beauty product stuff or your stress hormones or extra sex hormones, or you're taking hormone replacement therapy or birth control or whatever it is, even if you're just taking daily Tylenol or NSAIDs or whatever, if your body can't get those out, that's actually one of the contributing factors of leaky gut. Digestive issues, constantly constipated or diarrhea or vacillating between the two. For me personally, I would always have to make sure that I had a lot of water and that I had enough fiber and with my veggies. And it was always difficult when I traveled because I would suffer with constant constipation, which is uncomfortable and just terrible to deal with on the regular. And then also chronic infections. Makes me think of people that go from sinus infection to ear infection to bladder infection to another sinus infection to bladder infection or whatever. So that's your how to get leaky gut list. Eating foods that you have sensitivities to, having nutrient depletion issues, impaired stress management, impaired detoxification abilities, digestive issues, and chronic infections. So like I said before, we can't do anything about your gene pool. Those genes are like bullets in your gun, but we can keep you from pulling the trigger by addressing specific diet and lifestyle issues. If not, this vicious cycle is just going to keep going and going and going and going. Now, are you starting to see why simply just taking a thyroid medication, it might make your lab slips look better, but it doesn't necessarily help you deal with all of the symptoms, especially if you have something like leaky gut? This is where I come in as a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. I really help you get to the root of the problem. We pull back that lens, that wide lens. And so when a client comes to me with signs of thyroid dysfunction, I'm hoping that we catch it in time before these antibodies develop and start their assault on the thyroid gland. If a client comes to me already with an autoimmune disease in play, this is where I can implement diet and lifestyle changes to help slow down or restore, or in some cases even reverse a condition. In most cases, I've been so successful with helping them just remove a lot of their daily symptoms and burdens that they're plagued with, and everybody is just so stinking happy. But I really need to handle that list, that leaky gut list, to get anything done. But I do actually have a system that I do use. It is my 90-day kind of system to help improve thyroid function. Whatever camp you're in, you suspect you have it, or you're on your way to an autoimmune disease, and anything in between. These are the things that you can do in 90 days' time. They're going to make a big difference in your life. Before we go into that, I want you to remember that, like I said earlier, when you're dealing with an endocrine system, you always need to support the whole and not just the part. This isn't about just laser focusing on your thyroid. We're going to look at the whole picture. You also need to remember to be kind to yourself and respect that you are an individual, and you may not be as black and white as the book says that it's supposed to be, right? So no two people are alike, and especially when it comes to hormone issues. But the focus of any good thyroid protocol is to make sure they address 5 elements. And these are the same 5 that I use with my own clients. I'm going to, number 1, improve their digestion. Number 2, balance their blood sugar. Number 3, support the liver. Number 4, remove any toxic load that I possibly can. And then number 5, that's going to enable them to heal their leaky gut. That's really close to the order that I address them in. I'd say improving the digestion and supporting the liver, I kind of categorize as one, even though it's 2 separate things, and then balancing the blood sugar. But those are the 5 things that I really pull back and focus on when it comes to looking at the body. We treat the body, the mind, the spirit, and the soul. And I'm talking a lot about the body right now. We're not going to go into the meditation and exercise and the other things. But let's laser in a little bit on the diet. Now, from this point on, I want you to know that the number one thing that my clients need to learn how to do, and you need to learn how to do yourself if you're not already doing it, is you got to clean up that diet, girl. You need to be eating a nutrient-dense diet that's been properly prepared and proportioned right for you. Not only the actual portion or the size of the meal, but the ratios of the carbs, the fats, and the proteins, and all those goodies, right? That needs to be done first and foremost. Because we need to make sure that any micronutrient deficiencies that could be caused by your leaky gut are addressed. And it's safe to say that anyone with a full-blown autoimmune disease has some form of leaky gut. And when I say micronutrients, I'm talking about vitamins and minerals, okay? Now, macronutrients, I bet you're really familiar with those. That's carbs, fats, and proteins. And would you be surprised that macronutrient deficiencies are extremely common for thyroid sufferers? And there's a few reasons for this. One of the first reasons is because it's also common for these clients to have digestive enzyme deficiencies, such as hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid, that's your stomach acid, is needed to break down proteins into amino acids. Now, 1/3 of all Hashimoto's patients are deficient in not only hydrochloric acid, but also pancreatic enzymes and bile. And those are needed to break down fats into fatty acids and carbs into glucose. I know, it starts to get convoluted, but proteins and fats are necessary. They are necessary ingredients to make T4. Not enough T4, and you don't get enough T3. Okay, so it starts to make sense when you line these things out. Another breakdown that happens when a person is not eating enough protein or breaking down that protein into amino acids, it means that they're going to be insufficient in L-glutamine and L-tyrosine. And we don't want a short supply of L-glutamine and L-tyrosine. Why? Because those are specific amino acids that help the body heal the gut lining. And we want that gut lining to be a nice mucosal barrier and your cells to have good tight junctions so that nothing leaks out prematurely and can be properly broken down and digested so the body can use those nutrients, all of them, macro or micronutrients, at the right time to be delivered to the right cells. Are you starting to see this vicious cycle? It's kind of exciting once you know how it works, but it also opens your eyes and you can say, oh my gosh, now I can see why the medication that I'm taking isn't addressing all of these things. I'm going to step back and say something, probably from more of a heart from a personal trainer than a nutritionist. And I'm just going to say this, if you aren't doing the work, this is not going to work. And it's something that I actually see time and time again. And people blame their circumstances on their thyroid. And I sit down and I watch them either take pictures of their food and post it funny haha on Facebook, or maybe I'm with them. I have friends and family and whatever. And a lot of times, people will share with me what they're dealing with. And nothing makes me more disappointed than watching somebody sit down, especially with thyroid issues, and have a grilled cheese sandwich with 3 different cheeses, in there. So on bread, so they've got dairy, they've got toxic oils, they've got gluten in the bread, and then they're snacking on the French fries and whatever. And I'm like, what are you doing to yourself? So you're setting yourself up for disaster. And I feel like pulling your thyroid card away from you and saying, no more flagging this around and making this an excuse, because your behavior is also a contributing factor. Okay. So sorry, I needed to put that hat on there for a second, but it's the truth, right? It's the very first thing I said when I was talking about this 90 days. You need to stay in nutritional protocol. You need to eat the nutrient-dense foods, and you need to stay away from foods that are toxic, or this is not going to work. You can take all the notes you want. All right, I'm off of that topic. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. But all of this is not going to be a Band-Aid or a cure until you actually get that rolling. And that includes your medication that you're taking. That isn't the thyroid panacea that's just going to change your life and get you sleeping through the night and everything, if that's the way you're going to eat and treat yourself, right? Okay, so moving on. I'm going to help you address your blood sugar issues. Many of the clients, unbeknownst to them, have actually, I'm talking about thyroid clients, have a low tolerance for carbohydrates. So this low carb threshold actually is going to ignite your adrenals, because those carbs are going to spike your blood sugar, and it's going to kick your adrenals into action in an effort to balance your blood sugar. Now, this is stressful. This is a stress problem, and we already know that stress is a contributing factor, or the inability to properly manage stress for a thyroid person. So this is part of that cycle again. So when that cortisol is released into the body on a regular basis due to blood sugar spikes and dips, this creates additional problems for your thyroid function. So we work on balancing the blood sugar, and that doesn't take as much time as you would think. I'm currently working with an insulin-dependent diabetic, and we've only been working together for a month, and she is testing every single day her blood in normal blood sugar levels. And so, we're going to be working with her doctor very closely to see, she's backing off of her insulin, but it has to be done very gradually. And so she's testing on the regular, but it's easier to do than you think, as long as you stick with your protocol. Another thing I do is the support the liver. There's so many reasons why a client with thyroid issues needs to support the liver, but I'm just going to talk about 2. One, we need to increase bile production, and we need to improve the detoxification of excess hormones, that includes thyroid hormones and other toxins from the body. Your liver has over 300 different functions. This is just 2 of them, but these are 2 that directly impact your thyroid. Okay, so that's the dietary stuff that we're going to work on, right? I'm going to recap that just for a second. I'm going to make sure that we fill the gap for any micronutrient deficiencies. We're going to make sure that they're actually able to get the right amount of carbs, fats, and proteins, and we're going to get their body actually breaking down and digesting those carbs, fats, and proteins, so that they can have all those little components to go out and make things like, T4 and T3, right? So I'm also going to address blood sugar issues, and we're going to support the liver. So that's what we're working on so far in the dietary area. The next thing I'm really going to focus on is removing their toxic backlog. So this is going to have a direct effect on liver function as well as the gut. We have so many toxins in our lives. I mean, I can go on and on about how toxic our world is, and there's no way we're going to escape all of it. But we've got fluoride in our water. We're on all sorts of different medications, over the counter or prescribed, or beauty products, or household cleaners, plastics, cookware, the toxic foods that we eat, and processed foods, and air pollution, and all of these things. I can go on and on and on. But we need to make sure that the thyroid sufferer's body can eliminate these. We want you to be resilient, okay? So one of the ways that I'm going to help you here is I'm going to help you look for food sensitivities. The most glaring are wheat, dairy, and soy. And truthfully, we just cut those right out of the diet, right? Some of my clients actually go and get some allergy testing done. Now, allergies are different than sensitivities. You heard of IgG and IgE. These are different types of immune situations. Now, an IgG is a type 4 hypersensitivity. That's just a sensitivity. And IgE is a type 1 hypersensitivity, and we're going to call those allergies. So you may have a peanut allergy that's going to show up on an IgE test, and you're not going to want to eat peanuts like my daughter-in-law, right? She'll get the hives and her throat starts to swell and all of that kind of stuff. And she just may be sensitive to something like gluten or dairy, right? So it won't kill her, but it's definitely not good for her when she has something, and it puts her body in a state of chronic inflammation, which is we don't want people to have. So IgG flares, the foods that cause sensitivity flares, actually result in a flare or an elevation of thyroid antibodies. And when that happens, your thyroid symptoms often flare as well. So I see this a lot of times, with friends that don't honor the protocols for Hashimoto's, for example, and they eat their grilled cheese and their sweet potato fries and their dairy and the gluten and the toxic oils or whatever, and they'll share how it flares their eczema, or it gives them headaches, or it gives them stomach aches, or makes them feel lousy for a couple days. And when you're looking at IgG or sensitivity responses, there's about you can have a delay to where nothing happens and you think you got off scot-free. That can be about 4 days, but those symptoms can actually last and affect you for about 2 weeks. And I see this all the time. So I help my clients, when it comes down to it, is I help my clients repair their broken systems, and we restore balance or homeostasis in the body. And this allows the body to rebuild and function with resiliency. So what can you do? What can you do? You can work on those same 5 things. You can work on improving your digestion. You can work on balancing your blood sugar. You can work on supporting your liver and removing a toxic load and healing your leaky gut. Now, those are the things that you can do. I've told you what you should do, and if you stick to those things and you're eating the properly prepared, nutrient-dense food, I'm talking seasonal and local and going organic and changing. I mean, I'm not going to pull up my laminated floor. Come on. I'm not going to do that. So there's certain things, but I can change my laundry detergent. I don't even use lotions and stuff anymore, and I use olive oil. 99% of the time I use olive oil on my skin, and it's wonderful. You can get rid of a lot of that stuff, ladies, and it's going to make a huge difference. The big how-to, like the detailed how-to, that comes with working with somebody one-on-one. So you're more than welcome to work with me on a one-off basis, or a lot of my clients work with me for at least 6 sessions, and we string them out over about 6 weeks or 90 days, so that I can help them course correct, along the way as kind of life happens and season changes and everything. But working with somebody does make this a lot easier. But this is definitely something that you can do yourself. And your thyroid is not an excuse. It may be the reason why you're dealing with some things right now, but it is definitely not everything. And there's so many people that live amazing, wonderful lives with thyroid issues, as long as they follow their lifestyle protocol that they have discovered. And that's what I help people do. And it is really fun. And I know I'm sitting here with my own autoimmune disease of spondyloarthropathy, which, if you don't know, is an inflammatory arthritis. And I would say on most days, my pain level is just really low. It's like probably 95% better than my worst days. And you know what? I'll take it. I may never be completely out of the woods here, but I will take it. All right, so I hope you have enjoyed what you've learned here, and I tried to make this around 30 minutes, but so much information. Please give me a call if you have any questions. You can reach out to me on social media, on Facebook and Instagram or whatever, and I'm here for you. I'm definitely here for you, and if you have questions, I love it. I hope you're in our Facebook group. This is a group for women because we talk about some, kind of sensitive things and private things. So for Facebook group, is it hormones? Is this hormones or is it autoimmunity? You can find me there. I'm on there every single day, and we're always doing challenges and fun things. So thank you again for listening. My name is Brandy Lloyd, and I am the owner and creator of the Path Nutritional Therapy and the Restore program. And I'd like to help you out if you need help. And be well. Stay safe out there. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I know I did. There's always so much to learn, digest, and apply. My passion is to share the wealth of information and experience that I have learned and am continuing to learn. If you find that you're struggling with your health and need some help, I am totally here for you. I have many different programs and platforms to help you get to where you want to go. I am currently taking clients both online and in person, and I also offer self-paced courses as well as live and online small group classes. Also, each month I hold a live webinar with a different theme, and most recently I created a VIP Restore Experience membership platform. The VIP experience is exclusive content that I organize and share only with VIP members. It is a monthly opportunity to receive educational and inspirational material that no one else is getting unless they are a member. Each month, I organize a 60-minute live video chat that allows a little bit of Q&A along with the teaching. It is so fun. The best part is that each month, your mailbox will find new recipes, product demos, cooking demonstration, tips, and more. The super cool part about the VIP Restore experience is that for the next 3 months, I'm doing what I call a beta test group, because this is a new program. So the membership is only $15 a month. You can head over to thepathforhealth.com to get more information and sign up. There's no contract, so try it out. Make sure you're also signed up for my monthly newsletter, the blog, and the podcast. Staying plugged in is key to helping you stay on track with your goals. You can also find me personally on Facebook, Instagram, and most recently, TikTok. That's a blast. Thank you again for listening. I'm Brandy Lloyd on The Path for Health. I'll see you next time.